Hey, I'm Tanner with Team JR.
I just want to take a few minutes and talk about the 2K sync function that the JR servos have built into them.
And I'm going to show you how I set up my wings.
So before I even try to do the 2K sync on the aileron servos, I like to actually set it up and see how much control throw I'm getting from the start. Now generally I aim for about 38 degrees of control throw. Right now I'm getting a little bit more than I need to be getting. You can see down here at almost full throw, the control horn is starting to hit the wing a little bit. And I haven't even gotten to full stick yet. So I'm going to go ahead and change this so that we get a little bit less control throw and give a little more mechanical advantage to the servo. So right now you can see that I'm in the bottom of the 3 holes on this control horn. So I'm going to move this up 1 hole to the middle hole here and test again. Alright, so I went ahead and moved it up to the middle hole, and that actually seems to be giving me about 38 degrees of throw, which is what I'm looking for. And by the way, the servos are set to 150 degrees on the angle. Now, to set the angle on the servos, you actually need the XBus servo programmer. They are defaulted to 120 degrees out of the box. You have the option to change it to 150 or 180. Now, the reason I like to run 150 degrees of control throw out of the servo as opposed to the stock 120 degrees is because 150 degrees makes the servo physically move more. So here's about what you get, 120 degrees, and here's something about like 150. Now, the reason I run 150 degrees of travel out of the servo as opposed to the box stock 120 degrees is this gives you a lot more resolution. So there's more steps in the movement here. So the more steps means that your surface is going to be a lot more precise when it comes to center as opposed to maybe jumping around a little bit. This will give you a lot more crisp flying airplane. It'll be a lot more precise, and it's going to track a lot straighter. Now, because I'm going to use XBus on all this, my servos have to have a servo ID associated with them. So, as you can see, this wing is on here upside down, a little bit easier to work on. But this is actually the left wing panel, so you just got to keep that in mind if you work on it upside down. So since this is the left wing panel, these servo IDs are going to be 5, and the sub ID is going to be 1 on the inboard servo and 2 on the outboard servo. Now, I just set servo IDs initially for the initial setup. When the 2K sync runs on the programmer, it'll actually, you need to set the outside ID out here to a different ID, but it'll reassign it as soon as it's done syncing. So on the servo programmer, best way to find the servo ID, if you don't know, is make sure the cursor is up here at the top. See where it's blinking over ID 01. If it's not blinking there, you can move the cursor around using the buttons. Once you've got this selected, just roll the knob to the left until you get to the scan menu. And then just hit any key to start, and it'll start scanning. And this servo ID is 51. You heard it jump to life there, so the servo is now live. Okay, to change to 150 degrees of movement in the servo, push the down key here till you get to position. See how position's highlighted? Now you're going to use the knob to start scrolling through to the right. Just roll it to the right until you find the menu called Angle. And as you can see, I already have it set to 150. But if you need to change it, push the right key, go over here, and use the dial to change it as you need it. And then when you're done changing the angle, make sure you click back out using the left key. Otherwise, the servo will forget the setting. Okay, and like I mentioned, I like about 38 degrees of throw. On this particular model, it seems that 38 up and down makes for a nice axial roll. So I've kind of already initially set that using the sub-trim function in the XBus menu in the T14x4. However, when you do the 2K sync, you're going to have to manually do this. Again, I set it up like this initially so that I know that the setup is correct and that the throws will be correct when I go to run the 2K sync function. Okay, to start the 2K sync process, we got to change the ID of the outboard servo to 48, 49, or 50. So in the programmer, we're going to select the ID again, and then we're going to roll all the way back to scan. And this should find 5-2, which is the outboard servo here. So to change the ID of the servo, click the down key. Now use the roller here to find servo ID. And then click the right key to select the value. And then just increase this value until you get to 48, 49, or 50. Now click back out to save that. And since I have a sub ID programmed of -2, we need to change that back to 1. As a quick note on why I use 38 degrees of control throw on ailerons as opposed to, like, let's say 45. More control throw is not necessarily better. The more control throw that you have on this, the more the aerodynamic load pushing on this is going to strain your servo, and you're going to have to use a longer arm. So as you can see here, I'm actually using a relatively short arm. This is a 1.5 inch arm from JR. And it has a 1 1/4 hole, which is where I'm threaded into right now. And the furthest out hole is 1.5 inches. So I like to use the shortest arm possible with the 150 degrees of movement in the servo to get the most resolution out of everything. And this also will prolong the life of your servo. Servos have a lot of metal components inside them, and the more control throw that you have, the more strain there is on the servo, which more strain on a servo is not a good thing. The metal components inside, they'll start wearing into each other. That's a totally normal function of servos. Metal gears, especially steel gears like this with aluminum cases, you just want to prolong the life of your servo. And the last thing you want is to put a lot of strain on there and start building up a ton of slop real quick and wear your servos out quickly. So shortest arm possible on the servo with the longest possible on the control horn. And make sure that you offset your where you put the bolt in the holes. So this is the inboard horn. You can see I'm in the middle. And on the very outboard, I am actually in the furthest out hole. Now the reason I do this is because the actual thickness of the wing changes as it goes out to the tip. It gets thinner out here as opposed to the inside. So this distance right here from this bolt hole to the hinge line down inside here, this distance is the same here to here as this is from here to here. And that's, again, because the thickness of your aileron changes as it comes out. The distance to the hinge line inside of the control surface is what you need to be concerned with. Okay, now for the 2K sync, the programmer does have 2 ports. However, one port we have a battery plugged into. So you actually will need a Y harness or some kind of other hub that'll let you plug multiple servos into one lead. So I'm just going to use a Y harness, which I've got both servos plugged into here. The initial ID needs to be to the inboard servo. So again, the left wing is ID 5, inboard servo is -1. So that's what I have set on the programmer. Now we're going to scroll over to synchro mode. So just turn this dial all the way till you get to synchro mode. Now you're going to push the right key to enter. And now it's going to ask you to hit the right switch here to start. So as you can see, it found the servo right away. It found the inboard servo, and it found the outboard servo. If the IDs are not programmed correctly on these servos, the programmer will not find it. Right now, it's asking me to set the max angle high, which you actually physically move the control surface to whatever angle you want it. So I'm not into the exact precise, put a gauge on here and figure out the exact angle. Quick and dirty is plenty good enough. Realistically, what you want is both ailerons on both sides of the airplane to match their control throws. Most airplanes, you need more control throw up than down, usually 1 or 2 more degrees. On these AJ airplanes, they actually like the same control throw up and down. So I have these quick angle blocks that are cut to the angle that is etched onto them. So what I'm doing here is I'm just starting at the root and kind of adjusting the aileron until I get right about the amount of throw that I need. This may take 2 hands. Okay, I've got the exact angle I want. So we're going to click the right key here to set that. And now it's going to tell you to set the other side. So I'm going to set the other side real fast, and then we'll come right back. Okay, got the low angle set. Now we're going to click the right key again. And the sync is going to start. Now this is going to take about 10 minutes to do because it matches on a lot of different points. Now you'll see it start doing something like this, where it's actually trying to match both servos together, and it does it kind of a little bit aggressively until it figures out where the matched point is. So don't worry about it. That's totally normal for it to start jerking the servo back and forth real aggressively to try and find where the servos are matched at. So I'm going to let this run, and then when it is completed, we'll come back. One more thing. Ideally, you want your wing to be vertical. You don't want it to be horizontal because the aileron actually has a little bit of weight to it, and it may skew the sync just ever so slightly. So your wing needs to be vertical. In this demonstration, I'm just showing you how to do it, so I'm actually going to redo it after all this is done off camera. This is just basically how you do it. All right, it did take about 10 minutes, but it is now finished. It should have assigned ID 05-1 to this, which that shouldn't change. But this servo should mean ID 5-2 now. Okay, I've got the outboard servo out here plugged in. Let's check and see if it did assign that ID. And as you can see, 5-2. Okay, plugged in, hooked up to the transmitter. You'll notice that they are perfectly in sync. However, it's not really an issue, so to speak, but more it's just how the servos reprogram themselves when you do the sync function. You'll notice that they are not centered. It's more critical that the servos have the majority of their movement matched than it is to keep the centers. So all you got to do is go into your transmitter, into the XBus menu, and reprogram the center points on the servos. Okay, so for those of you not familiar with how to do the XBus function in the T14x4 transmitter, I hear that the T44 is also nearly identical, so those that have that radio, they should be able to follow along. But basically, we're going to go into the function list, and we're going to scroll until we find system list. We're going to go into here, and then we're going to scroll until we find the XBus menu and go into here. The type should already be set to mode A for those that have XBus set up. I'll have another video on how to do the whole aircraft on XBus coming out for those that aren't familiar. For this video, we're going to stick with setting up your aileron servos. So go ahead and highlight servos/converter and go into there. And we're going to find left aileron 1 and sub ID 01. So left aileron 1 is ID 5. Now, if you need to know what ID you set for each servo, and that also includes your servos in the tail, such as rudder or elevators or even throttle. Best way that I do it is I go into the XBus menu and highlight this servo ID here and click on it, and this will actually give you a snapshot of the IDs. So throttle is ID 1, right aileron is 2, right elevator's 3, rudder's 4, left aileron's 5, so on and so forth. So since we are working with the left aileron servos, we're going to select left aileron. You actually only have to select left aileron 1. Both of these are left aileron 1. What you'll change on the transmitter here is the sub ID, and that's this value here. To select the inboard aileron servo, as you can see, I've already disconnected the outboard servo. So we're going to adjust the center on the inboard aileron servo. Make sure it is set to left aileron 1, sub ID 01, and then scroll down to ID change and make sure that these match. If you mismatch these and click set, you will have to go back in and use the XBus programmer to reset the sub IDs. So be very careful when you click set on this so that you make sure that you are matched. And what's going to happen is the transmitter is going to find it and it's going to select this servo, and now we can change the values on this servo. So in order to set the neutral points, it's the plus or the minus key, and the center is how many steps. You can reset it, or you can go from 1 to 10 in 1-step increments. I like to do 1 to be very precise. And then you're just going to highlight the plus or the minus, and you're just going to click it until the surface goes to center. And if it's not moving quick enough for you, you need bigger steps, you can set bigger steps. So since we're so far off, I'm going to set it to 10. And as you can see, it's coming up a lot faster. Okay, so we're really close to center here, right about where we need to be. So I'm going to go ahead and click set. And the transmitter will tell you success, and it has successfully altered the center of this servo. Now we're going to repeat those steps for the outboard servo. You can see how far off the turnbuckle is. So we've actually got to move the servo that way. Now to do that, to switch to the outboard servo, again, be very careful when you do this, but we're going to switch to sub ID 2. Now you got to do this on both ID change and ID. So once both of these values match, click set, and now we've selected the outboard servo and we can adjust that. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust this off camera to get this back into center. Okay, we're really close here. There's kind of a neat trick that you can do for those of us that don't have a current meter. This will tell you how close you are to center. Go ahead and get the bolt in here, and you can hear the servos kind of whining at us. We're very close. But if you just try and wiggle the bolt back and forth, you can feel that there's a lot of interference. And if you just go to the radio and give her a few clicks, the bolt, you can start to feel it loosen. So I'll give it a few more. It's getting a little looser. And right here, that bolt basically slides in and out. When it does that, the servos are basically matched to each other at the center here. So this is like a really quick and dirty way to tell. I use it on every single model. I have a AJ laser, as a lot of you know, that has a little over 3,000 flights. It was set up just like this, and it's been perfectly fine since day one. Now make sure you click set to set those endpoints. Otherwise, the servo's going to forget it. Don't mess with travel. We've already set that with the 2K programmer. So at this point, just bolt your linkage back together and test the aileron servos out. It should be pretty much perfect now. And just like that, the servos are perfectly synced. We got the most resolution out of them that we can with 150 degrees. And we're basically ready to rock and roll. Don't forget to put Loctite, or in some instances, don't forget to put the nut back on the bottom of the bolt on the servo horn here. Definitely want that safety nut locked on there. For those of you that are concerned about possibly clearing out some of the points that the 2K sync function did with the servos when you had to readjust the center, don't worry about it too much. You're really after the majority here. You're not after this little tiny bit here that we had to change. The flight loads that the air is going to press upon your control surface, when the aircraft is actually flying is going to be a lot greater than any possible mismatch between the servos at that little bit of a movement. Just moving the servos a little bit back and forth here. It may be hard to hear on camera, but I'm not hearing anything that's telling me the servos are fighting each other. They're pretty much perfectly matched throughout the entire range of motion. Now, another important note, the 2K sync pretty good at matching servos. You can have your linkages pretty well off, and it'll still match them pretty well. I have seen that, where the distances here between the hinge line and where your turnbuckle bolts the control horn are completely off on both servos, and the 2K sync did match it. That is not a green light for you to just kind of throw the airplane together and send it, basically. As much as we all love to send an airplane, it's more critical that you spend a little bit of time to get all of your linkages correct and set up correct from the get-go to maximize the lifespan out of your servos here. And that also includes making sure that the holes in your control horns, so that's these holes right here, making sure that those are correctly centered over the hinge line. As you can see, it's all centered over the hinge line. I use slow curing epoxy on these. That gives me plenty of working time to make sure that I have these set up correctly.
All right, and that's pretty much how to do the 2K sync on your aileron servos with JR 2K servos. These are 8944s
on this airplane, so these are super fast. It works with 8955 and 8911, as well as the new 8911 Big Block and 8911 LS.
If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave me a comment below. You can also reach me on Facebook or Instagram @ExpressCS. Thanks for watching.